succeeding.
Yeah. So she now asked if I could ask Vox Africa to come and do a recording of that. Or
No, we have to stand by here.
improvement and stuff and things. And I said, okay.
Sorry?
I have to speak to somebody else.
All right, so everybody should be quiet. Yeah, we see standby. All right. Like China before her, goods produced in Africa carry a certain stigma, and there is a general lack of trust towards homemade brands. China has succeeded to become the world's largest manufacturer. Africans, on the other hand, have grown up in a culture of dependence on goods from abroad. They generally distrust the quality of goods made at home, but things are changing, and we wonder how the African customer's mentality can be changed alongside. Therefore, today on Hot Seat, we ask, Made in Africa, do you trust this brand? Good evening and welcome to Hot Seat with me, Akintayo. Our African proverb today says, if you don't stand for something, you will certainly fall for something. The Nigerian government recently launched a campaign to encourage buy the Nigerian-made brand. Let's quickly have a look at how that went.
A fashion accessories exhibition for exclusively locally produced items was recently held in Lagos to raise awareness about homemade brands. With over 160 million people, Nigeria's market potential is huge, but it has been taken over by foreign imported goods. Experts warn that dumping of goods from especially Asia are crowding and undermining Nigeria's already struggling manufacturing sector. The Nigerian government initiated a Buy Made in Nigeria campaign to try and revamp local production and create much-needed employment. However, the campaign has lacked funding and it has been difficult to change local mindsets that foreign goods are better and often cheaper.
I think it's just something I've always loved to do in terms of design and style, you know, like putting things together, and, you know, I've always been very interested in just the creative side of things. Interestingly enough, I didn't study fashion. I actually studied engineering. I'm an engineer by qualification. But I've always had like a creative streak in me.
Educated and trained in the UK as an engineer, Shana Khan found her passion for fashion right here in her country of birth, Nigeria. She is among a growing breed of young Nigerians who have taken up the task to market locally made goods from all walks of business as part of the country's Buy Made in Nigeria campaign. She founded a company, IMAS, 2 years ago in Lagos and employs 10 people on a permanent basis.
You know, things are changing and people are now beginning to make stuff from our local pieces, either from the local fabric or even from local charms or even local precious stones and stuff like that. So I certainly think that they're beginning to embrace that in terms of maybe how they accessorize and how they, you know, how they buy their pieces or how they'll place it with their outfit.
If I see a good product, I will buy it, even if it's made in China. But I'm very proud of Nigerian stuff. Yes, I understand that there is a quote-unquote stigma, you know, attached to the made in Nigerian stuff. But I can assure you, these are made in Nigeria. But they are very classy. They have a lot of quality. And I think that with people like us, very soon that slogan will be changing.
While Nigeria has a vibrant fashion industry known internationally for its Ankara traditional fabric prints, which are popular even among international celebrities, Nigerian accessories are only now making a breakthrough.
It's one of a kind, it's different. We hear of fashion shows, we hear of art exhibitions, we hear of, you know, displays, but we never have an event that is dedicated to just accessories. If you're a fashion inclined person, you know that accessories are a key part of any person's outfit.
When it comes to fashion, Nigerian manufacturers are already making a name for themselves because their items are unique. Experts say that to spread that success to other industries, producers have to find their own signature gimmick or function that makes them distinctively Nigerian.
And now to debate the issue of African-made brands and if we should trust it. I'm joined by Jesse Adeniji, a brand specialist who has worked with Western Union, Nando's, Cadbury, UBA Bank, Coca-Cola, and other blue-chip companies. He currently runs his outfit, Jesse May Consulting, here in London. And also got Dr. Sharif Alabi, an entrepreneur and marketing subject expert. He's also a consultant with the African Development Bank. And finally, we have Dr. Lawrence Mensah Akwete, a lecturer of marketing, communications and management at the London School of Commerce. He has written numerous articles and proposals on foreign direct investment, trade, and the economic development of less developed countries. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, let me start with Jesse as a brand specialist. Why is it so difficult for things made in Africa to have an inroad in the international market?
Thank you. I think it borders on Africans understanding the way the world works. And when you talk about branding, you're talking about two elements. You're talking about the internal things that go behind the brand, and then you're talking about the externals. The internal things are what you call, we refer to it, the iceberg theory. If you see an iceberg in the sea, you only see 9 to 10% just up there. But you've got 90% of the real issues, which are unseen, which are emotional. And that is trust, self-belief in the brand called Nigeria. That is where it starts. If you look at the Japanese economy, if you look at the South Korean economy, if you look at British economy, I can easily tell you, just 2 weeks ago, we had the Queen celebrating Jubilee year. And everywhere you went, you saw Made in Britain. Every time you saw Made in Britain. If you stick the name Made in Britain, the name Made in America, the name Made in Japan, it started from people believing in themselves, believing in their leaders, and believing in their culture. And they say, hey, we sorted out this issue. This is who we are, and this is what we're making of all those beliefs. Now, every brand you see, that's the 10%, that you get there. And you can now start to talk about how to create your brand, how to get your logos, how to get your business models, how to conquer your own market first and foremost, be comfortable in your local market, and how to project that onto the international market using a variety of different channels.
So is that lacking in Africa?
Currently, you and I know that if you see two Africans, they're always competing against themselves. So all of those issues of trust, identity, who am I? Who are we? What have we done in the past? Am I the son of a king? We are from Egypt, we went to Nubia, and we did all of that. Slave trade is just a blip, on who we are. Do you love your color? Are you at peace with yourself? You look at a country like Nigeria, we've got fantastic history that we can sell to the whole world. We've got the Oyo Empire, the kingdoms that are gone, the kind of things that have been developed in the past that we can leverage on, to sell ourselves to the West. Okay, take the Japanese, for instance. When there was a shipwreck of the Portuguese and the English, so they captured one guy who was one captain, and they learned everything about the outside world. Have you developed this way, though? So they invited these people on purpose to come into Japan. And when they got to Japan, they taught them different set of ways. They sent out ambassadors to America to go and study what is this that these guys have that we don't have as Japanese. After a while, this emperor that came and said, yeah, we've learned enough. You guys leave. Now they took all the learnings, the Western learnings, and they run it through their own cultural sieves.
Okay.
And then today we have Toyota, they fought the war. America underestimated their power to fight a global war, and they showed it to the world. And after they were bumped, they relied on this self-internal belief to come up with Toyota brands that we have today.
So talking about self-internal belief, Dr. Alabi, just like Jesse just said, a lot of people believe that the problem is internal, Africans themselves. Why is it that Africans don't believe in themselves, especially even the brands that come from Africa?
I think there are probably a lot of factors connected to that. Intrinsically, a brand represents different things to different people. But I think on the basic face of it, it is mostly functional. And I think in the past, when the African markets were open to the West, the old colonialists, they were ready markets. So they didn't have to do any marketing or sales. They're just ready markets for them to dump their products. So naturally, these are the goods that people were used to. There was very few, if any, local manufacturing at the time. Though unfortunately, after the colonialists have left, people have not moved on from there. And I think it goes back to the point Jesse made, that when you have not taken the lessons of the visitors when they were on your home front, and you allow them to go away with those experiences and the expertise, you'll almost certainly left with continuous dependence on them. Unfortunately, that has also led to some sort of conspicuous consumption of some kind, that we now have this preference for what is foreign goods. What does it mean to have a foreign-made product as opposed to using a domestic-made product? That in itself represents some kind of image to the person consuming that product. So the brand represents not just the physical elements or the functional elements, but also the symbolic elements, and what those symbolic elements mean in terms of value as they represent me as a person. Will I, for example, be comfortable seeing even driving a Ford car as opposed to being seen driving a Japanese or German-made car, for instance? What does that mean for me, compare me to what I have in terms of, as opposed to what you might call value goods, or most of these economic goods, compared to what my neighbor has? In Nigeria, I think, for example, they have this term called I better pass my neighbor when it comes to the issue of generating electricity. So it's not just me having my own generating set now in the home, but I have to make sure that the generator set that I have is far better and bigger than yours, even if I do not have the need necessarily to generate that much power. So it is those things connected, combined to represent what it is for the individual. What does it mean for me? If I was simply hungry, and I just want to quench that hunger, for instance, I could walk into McDonald's and have a good meal, and I'll be fine. But to be seen walking into McDonald's, for instance, will not agree with my personal image of myself and how I want to be seen by the outside world. So therefore, rather, I'll walk into a 5-star hotel and sit in the restaurant and dine and all that. But the basic function is there. When it comes to the issue of trust, again, the brand conjures up all sorts of things for the individual. The foreign goods, I believe, excuse in the mind of the consumer this so-called image of the good life, and which unfortunately we don't think we could get from our own domestic-made products, and that I think is a real problem. Now, can you counter that maybe on the issues of pricing? Probably not, but the trouble is most of the foreign goods that come in also have enjoyed large economies of scale. So they come almost at subsidized prices that even a local manufacturer in Africa will have real difficulties competing with. But until you begin to try to influence people's mind, that I think is where the job of the marketing and the brand people come in. To try and convince people that actually in the long run, it pays more to do business with those of the manufacturers at home. Not only that, you're promoting local manufacturing, and in the long run, the cost of production locally can come down as well, that you do not need even to have these foreign goods coming to your country. Okay,
Dr. Akwete, the issue of dependence on foreign goods, just like Dr. Labi said, why is it like is it more of a status thing for Africans that they would rather go for more expensive foreign goods than even their goods that might be even better?
I'll look at it from this perspective. First of all, it depends upon the type of goods that we are talking about. Yeah. Now, in Africa, for example, we export different types of goods. Now, there's the manufacturing goods. I'll come to that in a minute. There are goods of fashion, as your video has just shown us. We have cash crops that we export to the foreign countries, and also other type of goods. Now, if it comes to African goods, like the Nigerian fashion that we have just seen, I think the quality is excellent. And then when you go into the UK shops here, you see a lot of dresses that are made from Nigeria or made in Ghana that have been sold at very good costs here. And the quality is excellent as well. If you look at crops, the white people here just want us to be people who are always sending them raw materials like the cocoa that comes from Ghana, the timber that comes from Ghana. As soon as they are transferred into some value added to it into semi-manufactured goods, they want to add tariffs to it and want to prevent us from sending it to this country. You know, that is the problem we have. Now, let's go to the manufactured goods. Why is it that Africans want goods from abroad? The two things are quality and packaging. Of course, most of the goods that come from abroad have a certain category of quality attached to them. The same thing cannot be replicated in Africa because of lack of manufacturing genius in most African countries. How can we attack that? What we have to do is to get these manufacturers to come and set up local manufacturing industries in our African countries. When that is done in that particular way, then we can be able to match the quality. It's the quality that attracts Africans going abroad to buy. While we have the potential to manufacture equally good manufactured goods in our country, but we don't have the equipment, we don't have the industries. We have to create that.
Dr. Okete, I was about to even, I was coming to that. The issue of cocoa in Ghana and Ivory Coast. I saw somebody a colleague came recently with the cocoa, the chocolate bars from Ghana.
Yes.
And I saw it, but the packaging wasn't as beautiful as what you see all over Europe.
Yes.
But the cocoa content was far better than what we have here with the UK products or the European products.
Do you know something?
Yeah.
The Ghana chocolate is a hot cake in Japan. They always like the Ghana chocolate.
But why not the good package to attract
people?
But
the packaging is the problem. You know, our industry should be able to raise at that level of packaging. But now I can tell you that the packaging by the Ghana cocoa is a lot better than it used to be. It attracts a lot of customers in Japan because of the quality. Why? It doesn't contain too much sugar, but it has a lot of cocoa content and some nutritional contents there, which the Japanese love so much. You know, so Japan is the biggest market for Ghana's cocoa as we talk. When it comes to the UK markets or the American market, like I said earlier, tariffs are slapped on it, and they just want to artificially prevent us from sending the products to Europe.
If I may come in there, the topic itself is quite wide to dissect it. When you talk about cocoa, what you get from Ghana is 100% natural. When the cocoa comes into Europe, what you get, if you read the labels very well,
you mean the raw cocoa beans?
If the raw cocoa beans come into Europe, what they do is they mix it with a host of things, milk, and so the content of cocoa that you actually get is actually less than 30%, but it is classified as chocolate and for the market. But I'm not going there now because as they say in Africa, they say if an adult falls flat on his face, it looks bad. But if a kid falls flat on his face, it looks forward. But you need to look back to understand where were you before and where are you right now? Why were you here where you are and how could you proceed from there?
And that's why I want to ask the question, that where did we get our mentality
of
believing that these products are better?
When Europeans, I will take the Kingdom of Benin for example. When the Europeans came to Benin, during to Sake during the time of Ovoranwano, I don't know. But what they did discover was that the kind of artifacts and the kind of skills that went into producing that stuff was not anywhere found in Europe as at that time. So what they did was they took out virtually everything they could get from gold artifacts. They took it to Europe and they formed the foundation of new schools of artistic development in Europe. So when you talk about Africa, you should not forget that we were the Kemets who started from Egypt. We start Nubian kingdom. And in all of these kingdoms, things that are quite evident, astrology, mathematics. There have been a tribe in Congo that performs cesarean operations. And it's quite, there was a kind of a woman who does that on herself. Cesarean operation. And at that point in time, there's nothing that could, so when you talk about quality and product, the Africans who lived then believed in themselves.
Yes.
Remember the Oyo Empire. Remember this kingdom in the Amazons in Benin. Dahomeans. They had a woman general. And I tell people, I said, look, before Beijing conference, where women are starting to seek their rights, we had women in Africa, from Ghana to Nigeria, who led whole armies, who led whole countries, and they fought the Europeans with their sophisticated weapon to a standstill. So if you do understand that we did not have a problem of quality and we didn't have a problem of self-belief.
Yes.
We produced what we had,
Yes.
and then it was bought in trade. We traded with all regions of the world, and that's how we become.
But when did that
No,
mentality start?
The mentality
Yeah.
started from slave trade.
Yeah.
Now, when the Europeans came to us, they forced a mindset on us. That's why I'm saying, when you start, you want to say branding, I can tell you how Korea used their own culture to build the same brand. Physics is universal. Chemistry is universal. Now, the progression of knowledge in that area may not be equal, but what we do in life is universal. Now, when the white people came to Africa, they told us our religion was bad, not minding that Christianity had been in Africa 400 years before they came to Africa. So now when they left, what they did was, if you saw all the development that happened in Africa, it was railroads towards where? To take all our raw materials out. Remember, they just had the Industrial Revolution in Europe. So they were taking UAC, United African Company.
Corporation.
The white people came to us through two ways. They came with religion to subdue our spirit. Then they came with commerce to take everything we had out of the place. And they turned us into an imported market. I mean, into a dumping ground. You know.
Yeah.
So now when that left, you take our leaders, for instance. We've got, if you're talking about fashion, I don't know of anywhere else. As we speak today, there's a controversial campaign done by a fashion chain. It's not Givenchy. I couldn't remember right now. What he used was he used Maasai warriors, Maasai tribe, in Kenya as models, and it says, "Oh, I'm going to give a token if you buy my." He's selling those African prints for like £350 a piece or £700 a piece, but out of each piece, maybe £5 goes, to that community. Now, there's been this debate: is it tokenism? Is it taking advantage? Is it helping them? So where I'm coming from there is, if you go to Africa, when we had our elites who went to school, remember the Romans. When the Romans when they wanted to rule, is a basic way to rule a conquered people. The Romans would kill everyone else and take the princes. They take the Germanic princes. They take the English princes back to Rome. They will school them in the ways of Rome. They will indoctrinate them and send them back to rule for them, because it's quite cheap, because they don't have to maintain an army. They have someone who is going back into that place to infiltrate their own culture and lord it over them and say, you are one of us. Now, that was what happened at independence. Take Nigeria, for example. At independence, all our leaders were wearing made in Nigeria. And we were wearing it with them. With pride. Then suddenly, something came. Bam. And we started getting cars from them. We started getting all sorts of things from them. So when you're talking about leadership and how it affects a whole mindset of a people, it starts with what the people themselves do. Now, nobody was interested in made in Africa or Nigeria. They'll take all the money outside. So that affected our universities. What do you call universities? Universities in this era and in eras past have been incubators, not where you just get certificates. Incubators for modern ideas. Ideas power brands. If you don't have ideas, you can't power brands. So now what they did was, Facebook came out of school. It was in school when Google came out of a university then. So I can give you about 70% of all new inventions came out of that.
Actually, we were running for the first part of the show. We're running out of time, but let me just quickly ask Dr. Akwete the very important question. You talked about something very important, bringing in foreign investors to come and have their industries, like Ivory Coast, Ghana. We've got a lot of cocoa there. Why don't we have Cadbury and other big chocolate companies come in there?
Fact,
why is it not working?
As we speak now, we have a big company called Cargill. Cargill, who is one of the biggest buyers of cocoa beans from Ghana. They've now gone to set a very huge factory in Tema, near Accra, about 22 miles away from Accra, and they have started exporting cocoa chocolates from Ghana, which is an excellent idea. I mean, touching on the same thing, I was just thinking about this. In Nigeria, for example, you have a vehicle assembly plant of Peugeot. Is that correct?
Yeah, Peugeot.
No.
Yeah.
Peugeot. Are they still there? I think it's
that's
gone now.
it has its glory days.
That is the only way
we had
that
Volkswagen
we
as
in
well.
Africa can step up our manufacturing basis. But let me tell you something. When these big companies, I've written a lot of articles on this, that we have to bring them in, create the enabling environment to come and set up industries in our country. But do we have the requisite infrastructure base which can be can receive this type of technological, advanced technology that is coming to our country? That is the problem. Just a minute. For example, in Ghana and in Nigeria, our electricity. Tomorrow there's no electricity. It comes on 1 hour and all the industry there are complaining. You know, we have to make sure that we have the requisite infrastructure to bring these guys in. And
Okay, let me quickly ask
Dr.
Dr. Alabi another important question. We import tea, we import oil. All these things are in Africa.
Yes.
Look at, even if you go to Kenya, even if you go to Ethiopia, the coffee is fantastic.
Yes.
We still import.
Yes.
Why?
Let me go back to probably pick up on some points that you've both mentioned, Jesse and Dr. Akwete. Somebody once said that the best way to control a man is to make him believe that his value system is worthless and that yours is superior. So long as you can do that successfully, everything else is possible for you to do. And that was the reason why we end up in the situation we are now, that we do not have, I said earlier, when our self-belief has been damaged. Like you said, if you don't stand for something, you stand for almost anything that's thrown at you. When our own self-belief has been damaged, we don't believe even in our own ability to produce anything good. Look at the same countries we're talking about and the leaders you're talking about. The so-called intellectuals, the educated ones, they're supposed to be the ones to drive the economy and development and the growth in Africa generally. They are the same people who have access to most of these importation mechanisms, whether through the licenses or the money that they use to bring them in.
Okay.
The businesses that deal in those same goods you mentioned are all controlled mostly by these same people, the elite you call them.
All right,
So,
Dr. Alabi, we're going to go on a break now. When we come back, we'll continue with the debate Made in Africa. Do you trust this brand? We still have a special guest here talking about Made in Africa. I'll see you in a moment.
Is this break compulsory? Is it for them to sue something else?
No, you have to. Can you do it again, please? Yeah, give me the cue again.
Yes.
Welcome back. You're still on Hot Seat with me, Akintayo, and we're asking, Made in Africa, do you trust this brand? What are your views on this subject? Send us your comments on Twitter at @hotseat_vox. Email us, hotseat@voxafrica.com, and join us on facebook.com/hotseat on Vox. Let's kick off this session with Dr. Sheriff Alabi. It's been hotting up, and I asked a question on importation of all sorts of products into the country. And it's how can we improve the manufacturing sector? I'll get to you later, Dr. Akwete,
Yes.
but it's like Dr. Akwete said something very, very important. He was asking, why is it that Peugeot is no longer in Nigeria? Volkswagen is no longer in Nigeria. How do we improve that?
Waiting to also get in on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everybody has to talk about that.
Let me make probably one
Yeah.
or two quick points on that. There are a lot of reasons, and I'm sure you both have yours, but for me, Africa still remains likely an unorganized continent, and as a market, therefore, unorganized market. So we may have systems of management, but we're actually managing something that is not organized. The end result will always be chaos. Peugeot disappeared. Volkswagen of Nigeria was also there as an assembly company, disappeared. And a few others of them like that. Dunlop disappeared, the tire company. Why? Because the local, as I said, the intellectuals who are meant to be at the helm of things managing, actually are managing something that is not organized or they manage badly. They run them down. But before that, there are the issues of infrastructure inefficiencies. So when you don't have sufficient manufacturing infrastructures to support what you're doing, the local cost of production goes so high that locally made goods just cannot compete. One, you're not making enough of it anyway to satisfy the demand that's being created locally there. So Africa is vast. The consumer base is vast. your local manufacturing capacity is not enough to meet those. You'll always, at some point, still need some export, some import rather. But the question is, how many of that or how much of that would you need? And I think the focus has shifted so much more on bringing in the imported goods rather than encouraging and supporting and facilitating the growth and further development of the local manufacturing. That is the problem. There's also this general belief, therefore, that the foreign goods, by definition, has to be better. But that is not necessarily the case.
Necessarily.
Not necessarily. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Everything you have both said boils down to that particular thing, the 90% of the eating iceberg.
Yes.
I'll give you an example of Awolowo. Leadership.
That's Western Nigeria.
Western Nigeria.
Yeah.
Now, before I give you this example, I would like us to understand that no nation is an island.
Of course.
In the global scheme of things, you have to find your niche. And I thought they taught all of us that in economics at secondary school levels.
In a globalized world.
Finding your own space.
Finding your own niche.
Yes.
You know. Now, you look at South Korea. South Korea, as of 1959, 57 to 59, they had just been humiliated. They fought a war with North Korea on ideological basis. They lost. It took the whole of the American war machine to help them retain and save their face. So they said, what can we do? IBM at that point in time was the biggest technological. So they started making chips. They find out the same conditions that were in Africa. They took that is abundance of unskilled labor, abundance of natural resources. They set up this stuff and they said, look, we'll be producing chips for IBM. So they were producing chips. But they had the brain power, the knowledge to understand that they have to organize it in such a way that it works for Koreans. So the government said, look, I cannot do this alone. They work with chaebols. They call the big companies, the monoliths, they call them chaebols. They work with them as they will. They were family businesses, but they were big enough to employ so many people. And now, from the production of chips, people did not know that chips was going to define nanotechnology, how sophisticated TVs became, and how small, you know, the equipment. So they started producing phones and TVs. So what is the spin-off that they had from there? They had LG. The LG is competing, and Samsung is competing. So they define competition within their own space, and then they define competition as competing globally.
Yeah,
today,
talking about
I'm coming back to Awolowo.
Yeah.
The same thing happened at around the same time. All the infrastructure that was needed to make the Western economy a global competitor, not even competing with Northern Nigeria or Eastern Nigeria.
Within Nigeria.
Competing globally.
Okay.
Remember, during that era, Nigeria was the number 6th or 7th nation to have TV in the whole of the world. That means a country like South Korea never had TV. A TV station. We had. So what he did, he had industrial estates. And I can tell you, go back to Nigeria today, no new, maybe 1 or 2 more industrial estates have been made since over 50 years ago. Now, is to understand, we brought in all of these people you asked us to bring in. How do we find our niche and make all this infrastructure that you provided work for you? That is where we are losing it. You take our universities, for instance. We will not get anywhere until kids who learn about technology can go to universities, display this talent, and we make informal sector to work with them and make it. Today, if you take America, what is sustaining America today? Apple. In fact, Apple has more money than the United States government, disposable money. You take Facebook, it's from the same place. You take Twitter,
Yeah,
It's from the same
just
place.
so you're mentioning all these big brands. Let's even talk about even the licensees. Dr. Labisa said something about like maybe it's not organized. Let's look at even Nigeria. I would want to ask Dr. Akwete that question. Why is it that government, like in a place like Nigeria and a place like Ghana, will give just one person the license to bring in so many products, to also manufacture cement, to manufacture, even the case of Nigeria, Dangote does everything. How did it happen
It is
to that
wrong
level?
to do that.
Yeah.
It should have been spread among all other companies. But before I come to that, you asked a very important question about why are people preferring coffee from abroad and all the rest. But I think we have to give credit where it belongs. When you take Nestle, for example, all the products that Nestle produces, now like coffee, Ideal Milk, Milo, they are all great brands, and they are so good quality. You know, I don't see why I am in London, and the coffee I use is always from Nestle in Ghana, because I think that quality is better than all the coffees here in the UK. So I think we have to give credit to some of these local manufacturing that we have. Nestle is a great company, but that boils down to what I said earlier on. It is an expatriate company that has got industries in all the West African and African countries, and they are turning out very good quality products. But the question you just asked is why government should give licenses to only one country to come and establish a production basis there. It is wrong. When we do that, then it means we are putting all our eggs in one basket. And we have to distribute this. Otherwise, we will not remain competitive. And then we will not be divergent in our production or the expansion of our manufacturing basis in the country. That is the problem that we have in Africa.
I want you to talk about the Nigerian experience, or like cement, rice, going to one company.
It's the same analogy all across Africa. In the Congo and everywhere else where you have diamond or gold, for instance.
You see, sorry, I haven't cut you short. That point you have made is a very important point.
That's what
the thing that I think cuts through that is corruption, because there is a 20% payment kickback to whoever is awarding this to Dangote.
Before we get to corruption, let's understand one thing.
All right, you go ahead.
Let's understand one thing.
Yes.
A brand moves in stages. Yeah. You have the primary stage.
Yes.
You have the secondary stage, and you have the tertiary stage.
Yes.
Now, mining or taking the raw materials itself is the primary stage.
Yes.
The raw materials, if you're a supplier of raw materials, it's going to keep you in poverty. That's what has happened to Africa for a long time. It happened to Asia over a long period of time. But they say, hey, if I keep giving you my raw stuff. Now, let me take the case of just diamonds, for instance. Now, you go to Ethiopia, you go to Congo. They send guys out there to work in horrific conditions to get this thing out. They get a salary, that is barely enough to feed the family. Now, the government that takes some sort of payment takes just less than 0.5% of the raw diamonds. Now, the raw diamonds or gold comes over now to Europe. Then they shine it up and they do all sort of stuff. Something that is bought from you from $5 an ounce quickly goes over to 2,000 pounds an ounce.
Yeah, even now, I don't want don't even go into diamonds. Even cocoa in Ivory Coast. Why is it that the farmers are paid very little? Tobacco in Malawi, the farmers are paid very little, and they come to Europe. Tobacco in Europe is very expensive.
That's exactly.
And the farmers that
excuse me. Let me land on that.
He has made a very good point there.
What happens between
what I always question is, why do we have our cocoa or our coffee being priced in something called the London Commodities Market? Why is that? When they are sending their Land Rovers to Nigeria or Ghana, do we tell them the price that we want to buy it from?
That's exactly. You didn't allow me to land.
We're running out of time.
What I'm trying to say is, you cannot change that. You have to define your own market. You have to say, that's where leadership comes in.
Yes.
Now, there's something in the world today, if you don't know it, learn about it. It's the rise of state capitalism. China is supposed to be communist, in nature. But in effect, it's a state capitalist. Now, you find that those who say that there's free markets like UK and the rest of the West, they are defining their motives because state capitalism is winning, because you can take all the state powers and the state thinking and push it in a way that makes so much wealth. India is creating 300 million middle class, same as China is doing. So what I'm saying is, when you want to add value to what you take Nigerian petroleum, for instance. We take crude oil and we just sell 2 million barrels a day away. We give it away to these people, and then 160 million people starts to fight over what is left over. That is when corruption comes in. Human nature comes in.
Just, I want you to explain in very simple layman language. Why would somebody, a farmer in Malawi, sell so little to a middleman, and they bring it here to the UK, and it's a lot of money that even the money went to the farmer, it would have been
a billionaire. Your question.
The same thing with the cocoa farmer in Ivory Coast or Ghana. Why must it be poor? And yet the people who bring it to the UK or anywhere in Europe, they are stickily rich, and the farmers are still poor.
In layman's terms, Asia did what you just asked me.
Yeah.
In Africa, they tell us this is what is in the book. This is how free market economy works. Then all our professors, all our governments run themselves aground doing that. Do you know what Asia said? Asia said, we are going to interfere with free market economy. There's nothing like free market economy. So that's why if you understand what you call state capitalism. So the guy in Asia, the government said, I am going to oversee this. I cannot allow my money to go into free fall. One, I'm going to protect my money, which represents how I can sell my goods. China for years refused to allow free market on his own money, so that they can be, they are in a position to keep producing and flooding Africa and killing your market.
I still want that question.
Your question is very good.
I'm still not convinced.
I'll come in after you.
I'm still not convinced.
Let's go back to the basic question.
Yeah.
Why is there such huge price differential between what the local producer gets and what it is sold for in the commercial market in Europe? It's simple. Very simple logic. You don't get what you deserve in any situation. You get what you negotiate. What is lacking? It is the ability of the farmers or the farmers' representatives to negotiate what will be substantially beneficial to both themselves as middlemen and the producers. What happens is this: the manufacturers at this end who add the final value to packaging and branding and the retail obviously factored in their cost. The middlemen represent the farmers factored in their cost. But what they're looking after is usually the middle point and the end point, but not the person that's growing it. But all of that is changing, I think, to some extent with the movement in fair trade. That is where the concept of fair trade comes in, that they actually came in to negotiate on behalf of those farmers or producers back there, prices which will not only guarantee that their goods get to Europe successfully for reasonable prices, but also to guarantee them some income when those products, don't forget, some of those products go out of season as well. So when they're out of season, the farmers usually suffer. But now that doesn't happen anymore. With the fair trade movement, that has been taken care of. What is happening is the fact that, I said it before, we don't have good negotiators on our lands. And
it goes beyond,
they go usually for the easiest option, which is look after me and I'm happy. And I just give the guy there.
What I'm saying is,
sorry, just a minute. Let me just come in there to your point. Dr. Nkrumah of Ghana attempted to solve that problem. Just before he was overthrown in 1966, he built silos in Tema so that we'll hoard the cocoa from Ghana, we'll put them in there, so that we'll create an artificial shortage, so that when the Western powers want our cocoa, we will be able to tell them how much we want to sell our cocoa. But Dr. Alabi has hit a good point. No, Nkrumah couldn't do that. You know, the West people were able to negotiate or to very crafty, manipulate, that's the word.
That's what.
Let me just finish. Eventually, they removed him there because they were seeing him as a threat. You know, in fact, had that thing succeeded, we in Ghana, our cocoa has a very good premium. We'll be able to tell them how much we want to sell our cocoa. But it couldn't happen. And like Dr. Alabi said, it boils down to negotiation. But at the end of it, the producer doesn't get a fair price for the cocoa. well, the fair trade is doing its best.
Excuse me, doctor.
But just 1 minute.
Yeah.
But the producer is still at the receiving end.
It comes down to the issue of markets. As long as in strategy, what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah is trying to do is trying to control the market via price mechanisms.
Yes.
Somebody who has better money, and you are not the only one producing cocoa, it can manipulate every one of you around. Yes. Africa must find a way to add value, to move from I am the supplier, I'm sending to add value.
But how do you do that?
Now, that's what I'm telling you. Fine. We don't need, I can take you to Tesco.
Yes.
If you go to Tesco Acne, you find a word section. And you find another section for word section beers. And you find all these ethnic markets.
Yes.
Now, Nigerian Star Lager is hidden in ethnic markets aisle. But you find beers from Japan, beers from Germany, beers from Holland. Commanding
in prominent display areas.
Now, what I'm saying to you is, Africa has to say, I am going to take our oil, for instance. Simple analysis. I was growing up. We had an excursion into one oil company, so we were showing how it works. There are 16 different products that comes from crude oil. And part of it would develop plastics.
Yes.
Part of it goes into synthetic cloth making, and all kind of varied uses. Now, the same, we have people in government who are not thinking for Africa to say, how can we refine our own products and sell? You can make more money by selling 16 different products. And you'll not be liable to market shocks the way they are. And you'll be providing employment for your own people. And when somebody wants to come and invest in you, it's not going to be like Shell. They come in, stay in Abuja, go to offshore, take the oil out. They don't have any dealing with you. They are not transferring technology to you.
So in other words, like governments and negotiators are not doing their work.
It's not a question of negotiation. It's a question of capacity building.
Can I just
build your own markets?
Yeah, because I want us to move away from that because it's taking time.
Can I just very quickly, if you're looking there if you're asking the question, how can we move forward from this point? Right. From just being a simple supplier of raw materials.
Exactly.
Currently, I can tell you that the largest cashew processing plant in the world is in Ivory Coast.
Cashew?
Yes. And a lot of people don't know that. As a matter of fact, if you go to the shops, usually you see cashew packaged, say, made in India. Or made in, usually most of them come from Tanzania and East Africa. But the largest cashew processing plant right now in the whole world is in Cote d'Ivoire. Now, the same country that produces the largest cocoa. Right, in the world. Now, if you start looking at that, somebody has brought the idea in to set up a local manufacturing base. When you do that, you're adding value at source. Now, whether they package those cashew packaging eventually as made in Cote d'Ivoire or package them as made in India or made in Taiwan is another matter. But I think this is why the point I made earlier was saying what people negotiate is what they get. If we can encourage more of such local manufacturing.
But how can those packaged cashews enter the European market? Because they add tariffs to it, which makes it more expensive.
Right.
You know, that's the problem.
Initially, China had the same problem.
Yes.
China said, who am I going to sell to? If they don't allow me to sell in the Western markets, I will sell in Africa. So they use Africa as a testing ground to perfect their technology. That's what I'm saying to you. I'll take you. What Ghana has is 100% cocoa. Average European knows what the value of that cocoa is. I will, if I was in charge, I will negotiate to come and produce a Ghanaian type of cocoa. I will limit. If I produce 100 silos, you sell 40 silos, or you start to produce one silo and package it to higher standards, and you find market. You mentioned Japan. Japan is not saying I'm putting tariffs. I'm going to Japan. Secondly, that's why I'm talking to you about the iceberg issue. The local market. If you peg the African guy to the same, if you don't develop the economy and stimulate growth internally, you start to sell some of the stuff that you make to those people to self-believe. So when they want to eat, I know I ate a lot of chocolates when I was back home in Nigeria, and I spent quite a lot of money to it. If I was spending that money to a Nigerian company, and they are turning that money and put it in research and development, if it's 10 years, we will get to that point. So as a producer of cocoa, you have an internal market that is taking some of those things at the right price and developing your own people. Then you have these other markets that are not Western. We are not tied to the Western apron strings.
Thank you very much. That is intra-African trade.
So
that is the type
so the
of thing
third one is when you do those two things, you force the hands of the Westerners to say, hey, these guys are moving away from where we are. So they will negotiate with you on your own. Take the country of Congo. It's both local and foreign interests is not making Congo to work. Why? Because the iPhone you carry has a material that comes from exclusively from Congo in it.
Yes.
And they are sending proxy armies to fight this. Now, if the local guys who are fighting themselves says, I talk about competing globally, set your benchmark globally, they can sit back and say, let's be one. If we are one, let's Congo return to normal political situation. Now, we will put all of our armies in charge of this.
Okay.
Now, we'll negotiate and sell at the higher rate. And people will now come and negotiate with us officially. And you can make a lot more money.
Negotiation is the problem.
We have to quickly move on because we have very few minutes remaining.
I mentioned intra-African trade. That is one solution that we should be looking at. You know, instead of selling our goods to abroad, to Europe or this thing, we can trade among ourselves.
And Doctor, there's one issue I just want to quickly touch on. Some of the poorest African countries have a lot of resources under their soil. Look at Niger, uranium. And a lot of Western powers need this. Yet Nigeria is very poor. Is it still the same problem we're having? Like something is wrong somewhere. That's like they have a lot of resources under them, yet they are the poorest in the world.
Before a foreign company comes in to invest in your country, there are so many things that they will look at. They will look at your economic indices, you know, the economic like your inflation and your other things. But the strongest thing they look for is infrastructure and political stability, you know? Because most of our African countries, what has actually made people, our countries, unattractive to foreign investment have been political instability. Tomorrow there's a coup. Tomorrow there's a change of government. Imagine somebody brings 500 billion to come and invest in Niger, and tomorrow there's a change of government and the policies change. You know, that money will be at risk. That is one of the reasons. But uranium, for example, is a specialist area. You know, countries like Russia and United States and France, they want to do nuclear things. It's not every country that is interested in the nuclear.
Okay, let's move away from that. Let me just quickly talk about the brand of. Let's take Nando's. You've worked on Nando's as a brand. Nando's, a lot of people don't even know Nando's is South African because they are everywhere in the UK. Some people even think they are from America. But how did Nando's do it in such a way that they didn't even focus on where they came from or whatever? They just like on their product and they're everywhere.
Very good example.
It's the thing I've been saying about branding. Branding is not, it's about 80% not the product itself. Branding is about perception and value creation. Now, before I get to Nando's, I take a case that is similar to what you've given me. Red Bull. What is Red Bull? Red Bull is a local elixir that have been produced in Indonesia for ages. It's just like our Burantashi or Kunu or Gogoro in Nigeria. So it took a marketing guy, Austrian, who went to that place. He got off the plane. They give it to them when they, you know, it's like you're traveling 16 hours to get into Indonesia and as jet lag, you know, to wear off jet lag so you can go straight into a meeting. I said, this is working. Now, you sit with me, what can we do? Can you tone it down a little bit and produce it for us? And that's how Red Bull came about. So Red Bull is not a drink manufacturing company. It's actually a full marketing company that happens to produce drinks. So now they say, how do we market this? Let's look at energy areas. Let's create new things. Now, we have a brand like that came from Ghana that is making a lot of waves in Nigeria as we speak. It's called Alomo Bitters. Now, I look at, funnily I knew the guy, I work with the guy in Leo Bonnet who handles their account in Nigeria. And I look at that brand and I see the potential that is got with diaspora markets, not white diaspora markets to even start with. I'm talking about black diaspora markets. Now, a lot of meat is being created around it that will eventually kill it. Now, all you need to do is separate it out and say it's like Red Bull.
Yeah, but
alternative.
how do some
Nah,
of them
but do
do
you-
it
No,
in
wait,
such a way
sorry,
that
I'm coming,
the
that's-
few brands who do very
That's
well?
what I'm saying.
Sorry,
that are
you
not-
mentioned-
Wait,
you
listen.
mentioned-
Because
sorry,
we're
one minute.
running out of time.
let me
One minute.
let me just
you
finish.
mentioned Nando's. Do we have Nando's in Nigeria?
They pulled out of
Exactly.
Nigeria at the end of the day.
I worked.
See, the point I want to make there is the purchasing power of the local people.
It hasn't
You know,
got anything to
sometimes
do
it's
with purchasing power.
No,
I worked
sometimes
on
it's the money.
it. See, I worked on it.
Yes.
I worked. Leo Bonnet is on Aromira Avenue. I order Nando's every time. But if you
Yeah, you can
wait,
order it, but other
wait.
families cannot order
Let
it.
me tell you, you don't need all the families to be rich.
Yes.
You have market categories,
Yes.
and you have socioeconomic classes.
Yes.
So you target areas which you want
Yes.
to get your best profit. But what I'm
Yes.
telling you is, what makes Nando's? What is the most important thing? It is called the peri-peri,
Yes.
which is pepper. Chicken is chicken anywhere in the world.
Yes.
It is called that peri-peri. What is peri-peri to an African in Nigeria? It's called tatashi.
That's
Tatashi.
pepper.
Yeah,
So
that's
they
a form
took
of
that
pepper.
pepper and they put some stuff together. Now, that's what I'm telling you, that you don't need a lot. If you have something on the ground and
Yes.
what you don't have on the ground, it's all about taking it and marketing it.
Yes.
Now, they created a brand out of it and they said, this is how we serve it. If you go to a Nando's store anywhere in the world except Nigeria, that's what they packed out.
Yeah.
If you go to any Nando's store, you will get there. They have feta. They will give you options to speak. It's like they create an experience.
Standardized.
Experience. But in Nigeria, you know what they were doing? They were just offering a watered down version of what they have
On the Nando's.
at a very high rate. I got
Yeah, but let's move away from Nando's
So,
as a
okay,
brand.
okay.
Let's also talk. Let's quickly talk about the reason why we produce a lot of products in Africa and yet we still import it. It's just
Yeah,
like
the
what
same
happened. The
product.
same products. It's just like what happened in Nigeria. We know that the refineries were not
Yeah,
working. We
yeah.
produce a lot of oil, yet
Yes.
we import. The
Yes.
same thing happens with other products, like
Yes.
the coffee. You
Yeah.
mentioned about taking your Ghana
Yeah.
coffee here
Yes.
in the UK, but
Yeah.
at times you're home.
Yes.
Yet you still get a lot of foreign products being
Yes.
imported by local people.
You know, do you know something? It boils down to prestige sometimes. People just want to
Status.
show some class. And they said, oh, I got this from Belgium. Oh, I got this from the United Kingdom. I got this from the USA. No, but in effect, some of the things that come from abroad, things we have in Africa can equally match with them. You know, that's why I said at the beginning of the program, it depends upon the type of product we are looking at. Is it a manufacturing product like iPhone, which we cannot do in Africa? Or is it a fashion product, which African countries do very well in? Or is it a cash crop or food item? You have to know what manufacturing products, definitely those that came from abroad are better qualities than well, because we don't have the capacity to manufacture equally the same thing.
Like I said,
cars.
in the beginning,
Like,
we
so
talked about
wait.
self-belief and identity.
Okay.
If you anchor around for Western goods, it's because you don't know what your identity is. Today,
But it
we
depends
have.
upon the
Listen
goods.
to
Let
me.
me ask a
What type
final,
of
because
goods, is it?
let me ask a
What
final
I'm trying
question
to say
from
is-
Dr.
Okay.
Alabi.
Yeah.
The thing is like talking about internet era.
Yes.
It's like are we not left behind talking about African businesses? Because these days everybody is like, you want to know anything about a company, you go online. But these days, no up-to-date information, especially with the problems with the internet in Africa.
In
Are
Africa.
we not left behind?
We are left
Quickly.
behind not just in that area alone, but in several areas where we have failed to understand, one, the way the sector works and the benefits that can be derived from working effectively in that sector. So it's not just mobile telecommunications, it's energy, it's water, it is environmental management, it's
Infrastructure
anything,
generally.
infrastructure, any of those things. Once you ignore any of those things that affects people's and impact people's everyday life, one element missing in the jigsaw, the whole picture is just not
Okay.
complete. And that
Thank
is
you
the
very
problem.
much, gentlemen, for coming on the show. You can continue the debate on Twitter at @hotstate_Vox. Also join us at facebook.com/hotseat on Vox. Email us, hotseat@voxafrica.com, to leave your comments or suggestions. Remember, you can also watch all previous editions of this program on our website, voxafrica.co.uk/hotseat. Next week, claims and counterclaims of corrupt practices in various political parties in Ghana. Ghanaians will visit the polls in December. And this leads us to ask this question: has politics in Ghana gone rogue? Until then, it's good night from me.
Yes.
That generation, they started doing something in India. Yes. And soon they were exporting these guys to Germany. Soon they were exporting them to US. Now, what they did was, they now brought them back. Yes. The government did not say, I was the one who sent you to this place. So they rebuilt Silicon Valley in India. And they gave, you see all this mortgage, everything you find in the West, they brought everything back to India. And I said, guys, come back. They were offering them more salaries, better. Before you knew it, they created software that is cheaper. So it just doesn't make an economic sense in America for those big corporations to use them. And everybody on that basis of threats came to India. You get what I'm saying? So when you talk about sectors, I will always saw these things. If you don't have this basic infrastructure to move cars around, and then electric to drive manufacturing, how are you going to talk about digital economy?
I remember the
digital economy.
I remember the Volkswagen assembly plant in Lagos, for instance.
Oh, I didn't know those things have closed.
Oh, long time.
It's the same thing we are saying. Look, if you continue bringing, what were